Have you ever felt lost? What did you feel? I have felt lost many, many times, all along my life. And I want to share with you what I learned through my life so far, combined with many, many different relationships, with my family, with my friends, with the sacred plant, the yerba mate of this Mother Earth, and also with my soul brothers, my future partners, the market, the regenerative market that allow us to create this market-driven regeneration business model over the last 30 years. And in this process, you have to see the relationships that have really made it possible. I feel that I am you, that you allow me to be myself through the different relationships. This plant, the yerba mate plant, has allowed me to be a message from the earth, from the Atlantic forest, through this plant. Through the very personal relationships in the living room of my house, preparing these altars together with my wife and my children. I have 5 children, Santino, Seferino, Andina, Flora, Thea. They're like the most universal language for me. The closer I get to their language, to this family, to this friendship, all these fears, all these feelings that we get along life when we get lost, they start to become an opportunity to find a new self, to find new horizons, to discover new ways of doing things and get out of the double binds of 2 decisions that are not good and look for other ways to do things. That as a child for me was always inside. And why? Because I really found a lot of despair and uncertainty and pain as I grew up in Argentina with my father and mother, who are agronomists, and they were always in the frontier, the agricultural frontier with the wilderness. And I experienced the causes and consequences of deforestation, and it was like so painful, as a child to live this. But I found in the love, in the unconditional love of my parents, the courage to look and dream and look for alternatives at a very young age. And the yerba mate was always there, present in the family. There was conversations being shared that I couldn't quite understand, but they were crafting my soul. They were already doing the work. And as I became a student in Argentina, getting closer to graduating and really not knowing what I was going to study, if I was going to study economics, medicine, or law, I felt again this despair of trying to make decisions that none of the alternatives in front of me I liked. So in that search for something new, to follow my instinct, to follow my gut feelings, I went to California, to United States, not really knowing what I wanted, but just really in search of something new. I ended up in college and university because I visited a friend there to share yerba mate. And that allowed me to all of a sudden be in another culture, in a classroom with the northern students of the United States who kept on asking me, what is that you're drinking? You can't drink that in class, it's illegal. I said, well, it's not a drug. This is something that we drink every day in a very ordinary way, and that represents family, that represents friendship. It's much more than just a drink. But is it good for you? Where is it grown? Many of these questions I didn't know, and I had to go and research. And I found myself responding to these questions, and actually I was finding myself sharing and discovering my identity, my culture through this plant. I believed in family and friendship, yes, in something healthy, in a healthy food that comes from the forest. And as I was studying in the university food science, again, this sense of despair and lost as I was getting closer to graduation, because I wasn't interested in getting in the food science, food industry. And I wanted to, yes, get in the food, but something healthy, something that had a purpose, something that was helping the growers, growing, the food, healthy for the planet, healthy for the soil, for the water, healthy for the consumers too. So as I was in all these years in college, I became the yerba mate dealer, and I was the yerba guy. Probably nobody knew my name. I said, why not start a business selling yerba mate in North America as an alternative to coffee, as a healthy product, but also, why don't I go to Paraguay, to the source of this sacred plant that there is so much that I feel I still don't know. And that's when I went to Paraguay, where my parents were living at that moment. And I discovered something amazing I didn't know yet. And that is that the yerba mate plant is native to the Atlantic forest, and it grows in the shade. It grows in the shade of the araucarias, of the ipes, of the palo rosas, right? And I said, wow, this plant is saying to us that it can grow below the rainforest canopy without destroying it, without deforesting. And I had lived this experience since a very young kid, with my father, of feeling this pain inside of the causes and consequences of deforestation. So I said, this is perfect. We will sell this yerba mate in the United States, help preserve the Atlantic forest and the communities living in these last remnants of forest. Only 7% of the Atlantic forest is left. I said, well, this is an opportunity that we can use the market demand to protect more areas of Atlantic forest and actually restore. So I went back to California with this idea, to implement this idea. And I realized that to be an entrepreneur, to have an idea, it's great, but it's a lot of work, to do it by yourself. And that's when my partner and best friend, David Carr, said, I want to do this together with you. Let's do it together with all our friends. And we brought all our friends together, which we call the semillas. And together, we created this business called Guayaquil Yerba Mate 25 years ago. And we were like a band of brothers, of friends, with the same passion to restore the earth, the water, the wildlife through the market, voting with your dollar, and making this a healthy product available for all students in colleges and universities. And that's what we did. We started this market-driven conservation, and at that time we called it, model, and we started going to all the universities and coffee shops and health food stores in the West Coast of the United States. And it was very successful. People were looking for a healthy product that was also not only healthy for themselves, but healthy for the planet. You know? And then I found myself again in this sort of like lost in my identity and saying, well, this is going well. And I have this wonderful band of brothers marketing the yerba mate in the north. But I had this sense that I needed to go back to my culture, to the plant, and to work closely with indigenous cultures and small farmers living in these last remnants of forest. And with this search to find myself, a new self, I went to Argentina and I met Flor, my wife. We fell in love. We had the plan to form a family. We had the plan to share with indigenous cultures so much about what's going on in the north and the market. And we learned so much from the indigenous Guarani too, about the sense of community, of sharing, of hospitality, this humanity that we all have in common. And in this search with the small farmers and indigenous communities supplying the demand that was growing in the United States, it wasn't enough to just stay in Paraguay. So we went to Argentina. And in Argentina, there was, as you know, also a lot of yerba mate growing, but it's grown in a monoculture system. It's called, a monoculture system that comes from cultural identity too, from the farmers, which we thought we could change by paying more for the yerba mate so they can restore the plants, the native trees, and create this shade and these biological corridors between the last remnants of forest. But actually we failed. The farmers didn't trust us with this new agroforestry system, even if we would pay more for the supply and to internalize those costs to plant the native trees. So we went like, wow, this is new. I was, again, in a place of despair and uncertainty. Is this the right thing to do? Are we actually maybe not giving the right time to build the relationships? And that's when my first son was born, Santino, which he always brought this element of time, and he loves watches, and now he's 20. And he fixes all watches, and he brought this element of, Dad, relationships take time. I said, okay, but we need to supply a business with yerba mate, and there's not enough time. So that allowed me to do this and to look to a new horizon, which was to come to Brazil. But without leaving Argentina, without leaving that uncertainty there, we formed a foundation, the Agroecology Iguazu Foundation, and we decided to stay there to research, to educate, to articulate and communicate with others. And we learned so much that was benefiting also the projects in Paraguay and in Brazil too. And 14 years later, in Argentina today, there's already 20% of the yerba mate growers, sun-grown, are going shade. So it takes time and it works. Now they're convinced themselves and just selling the yerba mate in the conventional market. So you see the power of change that a business can do. A regenerative business not only has its own benefits within, but also has these collateral benefits without. But how important it is to research deep inside, our mistakes and learn from them and not be afraid to look for new alternatives of how to regenerate. And that's when we went to Brazil. And in Brazil, we realized that there was already shade-grown yerba mate growing in indigenous communities. large trees, native trees in the reserves of the Kaingangues in the state of Paraná, small agricultural farmers already doing shade-grown yerba mate. It was unbelievable. And my son Seferino was born, bringing this sense of music and celebration. So we took that to the communities too, always learning from what's closest to you, no? And we celebrated with all the communities, with all the stakeholders, you know, what our dreams are, what our challenges, our opportunities. And that's how we worked really well in Brazil. And now covering Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay, covering the whole bioregion of the Atlantic forest, no? No borders, all hermanos, brothers and sisters, no? With the North too, right? With the students in the North, with the market, allowing us to rebuild our cultural identity of the yerba mate, no? With this magnificent plant. And Andina brought this sense of justice. You know, my daughter was born there too. And she always said, we have to create equal opportunities. And that's what we focused on in our supply. Always looking at the small farmers, at the indigenous communities, no? That there's most needs. And our relationships, that combination of relationships between the North and the South is amazing. It really works. This sharing, the most important thing is the sharing, is the dialogue, is the opportunity to share our different perspectives, no? And find the common grounds. No? And as the business was growing, and this in the last 25 years, the managing partners, the founders, we already were sort of lost too in how to continue to grow this business, no? And how to take it global, how to make it, you know, this market-driven regeneration, something that can become a global movement, yes? And we couldn't do it by ourselves. So we brought in new management, leadership, no? New CEOs, and it was amazing. But it brought tension, of course. It brought challenges. It brought, you know, the challenge of growth and the rate of growth and the capacity to hold ecosystems that supply that growth. All these difficult double binds sometimes that we find ourselves into. What brought us the opportunity to keep on looking for new horizons in our business model is the dialogue, is the ability to sit down and share the differences, points of view that we have, our cultural backgrounds, no? Our histories, our personal lives. My twins were born at this time several years ago, struggling in their birth, no? And they brought this feeling of to fight for love, life and love, no? And that's what we do in Guayaquil today. We bring life to the center of the dialogue, to the center core of our business. How can we improve the conditions to life? Yes? And we become dream catchers. We know we're inspiring many others, students in the North, in the South, with our business model. And we know there's been other businesses that have started inspired in us. So we realize how important it is for everything that you do, as an individual, how important we are, how we have an effect on others, no? And in future generations. What is your yerba mate? You know, this is a question for me, for all of you. You know, I'm sure that deep inside of you, the more personal dialogues you have, the more universal they are. And the more impact they're going to have on a local level, on a regional level, and in a global level. Thank you very much.